People think powerful men stop feeling fear. The truth is, we just get better at hiding it. Rain blurred the city outside St. Mercy Hospital like smeared watercolor against glass. Chicago looked distant tonight. Cold. Almost unreal. I stepped through the automatic doors a little after 2 o'clock, carrying the kind of silence that made conversations die the second I entered a room. My black coat still held the sharp scent of winter air. Water dripped slowly from the edge of my sleeve onto the polished tile floor, while security guards pretended not to stare. Hospitals always sounded the same, no matter how much money sat in your bank account. Soft intercom announcements, rolling carts, quiet footsteps. Somewhere down the hallway, a baby cried for less than 3 seconds before someone comforted her. I hated places like this. Too many memories lived inside white walls. Too many reminders that money could delay loss, but never erase it. One of my men walked slightly behind me, speaking low into an earpiece while keeping his eyes on everyone around us. Another held the elevator open. They expected me to keep moving. I didn't. Something near the pediatric waiting area caught my attention. A little girl sat alone beneath a flickering television screen playing an old cartoon with the volume muted. She looked tiny against the oversized hospital chair, her pink sneakers dangling inches above the floor. A stuffed bear rested in her lap, worn around one ear like it had survived years of nightmares. Most people avoided eye contact with me immediately. Adults sensed danger before words were ever spoken. But children were different. Children noticed sadness first. She looked directly at me with wide blue eyes that didn't carry an ounce of fear, just curiosity. "Mom says hospitals feel colder at night," she said softly. Her voice barely rose above the hum of fluorescent lights. I think she's right. I glanced toward the woman sleeping beside her. Blonde hair partially covered her face while one arm stayed protectively wrapped around the child even in sleep. Exhaustion sat heavily on her like a second coat. There was a half-empty coffee cup near her feet and hospital paperwork folded tightly in her lap. She looked like someone who had been carrying the world alone for too long. "You should be asleep," I told the little girl quietly. She shrugged. "My chest hurts when I lay down too long." The words landed harder than they should have. I stared at her for a moment, noticing the small hospital bracelet around her wrist. Lily Bennett, 8 years old. She tilted her head slightly before pointing toward my hand. "You're bleeding." I looked down. A thin cut near my knuckles had reopened in the cold. Nothing serious, barely noticeable, but somehow she noticed anyway. "Does it hurt?" she asked. Nobody had asked me that question in years without wanting something in return. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could speak, the sleeping woman suddenly lifted her head, and the second her eyes met mine, all the color drained from her face. Some people walk into your life like a storm. Others walk in quietly and somehow ruin every wall you built to survive. Claire Bennett stood up so fast, the paper coffee cup slipped from her hand and spilled across the hospital floor. Her face turned pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, while her breathing visibly changed. For a second, neither of us spoke. 8 years disappeared between us without warning. The same blue eyes, the same nervous habit of pressing her lips together when she was scared. Except now there was exhaustion behind them, the kind that came from carrying too much life alone. "Mom," the little girl whispered softly, looking between us. Claire immediately pulled herself together and stepped protectively closer to her daughter. "Lily," she said carefully, her voice tight. "Come sit beside me." The little girl obeyed, though her curious eyes stayed fixed on me the entire time. I should have walked away then. Any normal person would have. But nothing about Claire Bennett had ever left me feeling normal. "You know him?" Lily asked innocently. Claire swallowed hard before answering. A long time ago. Her voice almost cracked on the last word. I stared at her in silence. 8 years ago. Claire disappeared from my life without explanation. No goodbye. No phone call. Nothing. One day she was there laughing in my apartment while rain tapped against the windows. The next day, she was gone like she had never existed. I searched for her for months, before finally convincing myself she did not want to be found. And now she was standing in front of me inside a hospital at 2 a.m. with a child sitting beside her. You disappeared, I said quietly. My bodyguards shifted awkwardly behind me. They had never heard me speak to anyone like this before. Claire glanced toward them nervously before lowering her voice. This is not the place. Damien, hearing my name from her mouth again did something dangerous to my chest. Lily looked up at her mother with confusion. Mommy, why do you sound scared? Claire immediately forced a small smile that did not reach her eyes. I am not scared, sweetheart. But she was. I could hear it in every breath she took. Lily suddenly tugged lightly on her mother's sleeve. My chest hurts again. Claire dropped to her knees instantly beside her daughter. Every ounce of fear inside her shifted into pure motherhood. Where does it hurt? Baby A little right here? Lily pressed a tiny hand against her chest while trying to stay brave. Claire brushed blonde hair away from the little girl's face and kissed her forehead gently. Okay. Slow breaths for Mommy. A nurse hurried over holding a clipboard. Miss Bennett, the cardiologist, is ready for Lily now. Claire nodded quickly before helping her daughter stand. Lily grabbed her stuffed bear with one arm, then looked back at me again. Bye, Mr. Damien. Nobody called me Mr. Damien. Men twice my age barely looked me in the eye. Yet somehow this little girl said my name like I was safe. Claire froze when Lily said it. Her eyes lifted slowly toward mine again, filled with panic this time. Real panic. Like she was terrified the universe had just made a mistake neither of us could undo, and for reasons I still could not explain, I suddenly did not want them leaving that hospital without me. You can survive almost anything in life, until the past suddenly looks back at you with familiar eyes. The pediatric cardiology wing felt quieter than the rest of the hospital. Softer lighting, smaller chairs, cartoon fish painted across pale blue walls that tried too hard to make sick children feel less afraid. I sat alone near the window while rain slid slowly down the glass outside. My men stayed back near the elevators, giving me distance without being asked. They understood something had shifted tonight, even if none of them understood what. Across the hallway, Claire filled out paperwork with tense hands while Lily sat swinging her legs beneath the chair beside her. Every few seconds, the little girl looked over at me and smiled like we were already friends. It made no sense. I had spent years building a reputation that kept people away from me. Fear was easier than trust, safer than attachment. Yet this child looked at me without hesitation. Mommy says staring is rude. Lily whispered loudly enough for me to hear. Claire immediately looked mortified. Lily, but I like him, the little girl added innocently. He looks lonely. Something inside my chest tightened unexpectedly. Claire closed her eyes briefly like she was exhausted in ways sleep could never fix. Then she stood and walked toward me slowly, arms folded tightly against herself. You should leave, Damien. Her voice stayed low and careful. This world is not yours. I almost laughed at that. You disappeared for 8 years, and that is the first thing you say to me. She glanced down the hallway nervously before answering. I did what I had to do. Without a word. Yes. Her answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. I stared at her face under the cold hospital lighting. She looked older than 31 tonight. Not because she lost beauty. Claire Bennett was still devastating in the quietest way possible. But exhaustion lived in her now. Responsibility. Survival. Who is helping you, I asked. I am helping myself. That is not what I asked. Before she could answer, Lily suddenly appeared beside us, holding her stuffed bear against her chest. Mommy, the nurse said we have to wait another 20 minutes. Claire immediately softened the second she looked down at her daughter. That change in her face nearly destroyed me. I had never seen Claire look at anyone with that kind of love before. Lily climbed onto the empty chair beside mine without invitation. Mr. Damien. Yeah, do you hate hospitals too? I looked at her tiny hospital bracelet again. Something like that. She nodded seriously, like we shared some secret understanding adults could not explain. Then she held out her stuffed bear toward me again. You can borrow him while we wait. I stared at the worn little bear in silence before carefully taking it from her hands. Claire watched the entire moment with panic slowly building behind her eyes. Not anger, not jealousy, fear, real fear. Like every second Lily spent near me brought us closer to something she had spent years trying to hide. Then Lily smiled again. And this time, I noticed it. The tiny dimple on the left side of her cheek. The exact same one I saw every morning when I looked into the mirror. Sometimes your heart recognizes the truth long before your mind is ready to survive it. I kept staring at that tiny dimple long after Lily looked away. My own mother used to touch the exact same spot on my face whenever I was angry as a child. She called it the mark that proved I had once known how to smile before the world taught me otherwise. Claire noticed where my eyes were focused and immediately stepped between us. Too fast? Too protective? Lily, she said carefully, why do not you go sit over there while I talk to Mr. Damien for a second? Lily frowned. But I like him. Just for a minute. Sweetheart, the little girl sighed dramatically before climbing down from the chair and wandering toward the aquarium near the nurse's station. The moment she was out of hearing distance, Claire turned toward me with panic written all over her face. Do not do this. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Do not start asking questions tonight. I stared at her for several long seconds. You think I do not deserve answers? You deserve peace? I almost laughed at that. Men like me do not get peace. Claire. She looked away immediately because she knew I was right. Silence settled heavily between us while rain continued sliding down the windows outside. Somewhere nearby, a machine beeped steadily inside another patient room. Hospitals never really slept. They just breathed differently after midnight. Why did you leave? I asked finally. Claire folded her arms tighter around herself. Because your world was dangerous. You knew my world before you fell in love with me. Her eyes flickered painfully at those words. Good. I wanted them to hurt. 8 years of silence deserved something. I was 23, she whispered. I thought love could survive anything back then. And now Claire glanced toward Lily again before answering. Now I know survival matters more. I followed her gaze slowly. That strange feeling inside my chest returned immediately, the second I looked at the little girl again. The blue eyes, the smile, the dimple. Even the way she tilted her head while watching the fish tank felt painfully familiar somehow. My instincts had kept me alive for years, and right now every instinct I had was screaming that something about this night was wrong. How old is she? I asked quietly. Claire froze, completely froze. Then she answered too carefully. 8. 8 years. My jaw tightened slightly. Claire noticed. Of course she noticed. She used to notice every small change in my breathing before I even spoke. Damien, she whispered shakily. Please. That one word told me more than any confession could have. My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. Dangerous. Controlled. The way it always did before something changed permanently. Before I could say another word, Lily suddenly pressed both hands against her chest again. Her face tightened in pain. Mommy! Claire rushed toward her instantly. Baby, look at me. Breathe slowly. A nurse hurried over at the same moment. Another doctor pushed through the double doors carrying a tablet. Miss Bennett, the doctor asked quickly. We reviewed Lily's scans. We need to run additional tests tonight. Claire looked terrified now. Is it serious? The doctor hesitated for half a second too long. And in that moment, the little girl reached for my hand instead of her mother's. A child does not know when they are changing your life forever. They just reach for your hand like it already belongs to them. The second Lily's small fingers wrapped around mine, the entire hallway went silent inside my head. Warm, tiny, trusting. I looked down slowly while she winced softly from the pain in her chest. Claire saw it too. The panic in her face deepened instantly, like she had just watched the worst possible future begin unfolding in real time. We need to take her for more imaging, the doctor explained carefully. There appears to be increased pressure around the heart. We want to move quickly to avoid complications. Claire nodded too fast. Okay. Whatever she needs. Lily tightened her grip on my hand before the nurses could wheel her away. You are still going to be here when I come back. Right. Nobody had asked me to stay anywhere in years. People usually begged for distance from me, not presence. I surprised myself by answering immediately. Yeah, kid. I will be here. She smiled weakly like that promise mattered more than medicine. Then the nurses guided her through the double doors, while Claire remained frozen beside me for half a second too long. She looked torn between following her daughter and running from me. Motherhood won. It always would. I watched her disappear down the hallway before finally exhaling slowly. Boss, one of my men asked carefully from behind me, should we secure the floor? No. My voice came out colder than intended. Nobody bothers them. He nodded once without question. I sat back down near the dark hospital windows while the storm outside continued swallowing Chicago streetlights in blurred streaks of rain. My mind kept replaying small details I could not ignore anymore. 8 years old. Blue eyes, left cheek dimple, blonde hair like Claire's, and that strange pull in my chest every time the little girl looked at me. I hated uncertainty. It was the one thing men in my world could not afford. But tonight, uncertainty sat beside me like a ghost. 20 minutes later. Claire returned alone, her arms folded tightly across herself as if she were physically holding herself together. She's getting another scan, she whispered. I looked up at her. Sit down, Claire. I should stay standing. You always did that when you were nervous. Her eyes flickered painfully toward mine again. Slowly. She sat beside me, close enough that I could smell faint traces of vanilla perfume beneath hospital air and rain. The same scent she wore years ago. I stared ahead at the hallway instead of at her. Tell me the truth. Claire's breathing changed instantly. Damien, do not lie to me tonight. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating silence. Then she whispered the words I already felt coming. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after I left. The world did not explode dramatically. No shouting, no chaos, just silence. Cold, devastating silence. I looked down at my hands slowly while every memory from 8 years ago rearranged itself into something almost unbearable. You never told me, I said quietly. Claire's eyes filled immediately. I tried. I turned toward her fully for the first time all night. You disappeared. A tear slipped down her face before she answered. Because the day I was going to tell you, someone put a gun against my stomach and warned me what happens to women who carry children connected to men like you. The cruelest part about becoming powerful is realizing the people you love paid the price long before you did. Claire cried quietly beside me while the storm outside swallowed the city in silver rain. Not dramatic sobbing, just exhausted tears from someone who had spent years carrying fear alone. I sat completely still, staring ahead at the empty hallway while her words repeated inside my head over and over again. Someone put a gun against my stomach, against my child, against my daughter, my daughter. The phrase felt unreal even inside my own mind. I had imagined many futures for myself over the years. None of them included fatherhood. Men like me were not built for normal lives. We built empires, enemies, graves, not families. Yet suddenly every memory tonight sharpened painfully into focus. Lily's smile, her eyes, the dimple. The way she trusted me instantly without understanding why. Blood recognized blood before truth ever arrived. Who I asked finally. Claire wiped quickly at her tears. It does not matter anymore. I turned toward her slowly. It matters to me. She shook her head immediately. That is exactly why I never told you. Her voice trembled now. I knew what you would become if you found out someone threatened your child. The word "your" nearly stopped my breathing. My child. 8 years old, and I had never held her hand until tonight. 8 birthdays. 8 Christmas mornings. 8 years of nightmares. Scraped knees. School pictures. Bedtime stories. Fevers. Laughter. Gone. I missed all of it. Not because I abandoned them, because someone decided fear was stronger than love. I lowered my head briefly, rubbing one hand across my jaw while anger settled quietly into my chest. Not explosive anger. Worse. Controlled anger. Claire recognized it instantly. Damien, she whispered shakily. Please do not disappear into that version of yourself tonight. I looked at her. You think I can hear what you just told me and stay calm? I think Lily needs her father more than she needs your revenge. The word father hit harder than anything else had. Before I could answer, the cardiologist returned through the double doors holding another scan in his hand. His expression alone made Claire stand immediately. What is wrong? She asked. The doctor glanced briefly toward me and my men before lowering his voice. We found a congenital defect around the left ventricle. It is treatable, but we need to monitor her very closely. Claire covered her mouth instantly. Is she going to die? No, the doctor answered carefully. But if her condition worsens suddenly, she may require emergency intervention. I stood up slowly. Whatever she needs, she gets. The doctor blinked slightly at my tone. Sir, we are doing everything we can. Then do more. Claire touched my arm immediately before my voice could harden further. That tiny contact nearly destroyed me because it felt familiar, like another life, another version of us before fear ruined everything. Can I see her? Claire asked softly. The doctor nodded. One at a time for now. She is asking for Mr. Damien. Silence. Absolute silence. Even my men looked stunned behind me. Claire closed her eyes briefly like she was surrendering to something larger than herself. Then she whispered the words I knew neither of us could take back anymore. Go see your daughter. Nobody warns you that becoming a father can happen in a single sentence and destroy every version of the man you used to be. I stood outside Lily's hospital room for several seconds before touching the handle. My hand had held weapons, contracts, millions of dollars in cash, the lives of powerful men. Yet somehow opening that door felt harder than all of it. Through the small glass window, I could see her lying beneath pale blue blankets with wires attached to her chest and a stuffed bear tucked under one arm. Too small for all those machines. Too innocent for the world connected to my name. I stepped inside quietly. The room smelled faintly like antiseptic and warm air from the vents humming overhead. Lily turned immediately when she heard the door close, and she smiled. That smile nearly ended me. "You stayed," she whispered sleepily. I moved closer to the bed slowly, like sudden movement might somehow break the moment apart. "I told you I would." Her tiny fingers reached toward mine again without hesitation. Trust came naturally to children who had not learned fear yet. I sat carefully beside the bed while monitors blinked softly in the darkened room. "Mommy cries when she thinks I am sleeping sometimes," Lily admitted quietly. I pretend not to notice. My chest tightened painfully. Claire had carried all of this alone. Every hospital visit, every fever, every moment of terror. Alone. Because of me. Because of my world. "Your mom loves you very much," I said softly. Lily nodded immediately. "I know." Then she studied my face with the same curious expression she had used all night. "But I think you look at me the same way she does." I froze. Completely froze. What way, like you are scared something bad will happen to me? I looked away briefly toward the rain outside the window because I suddenly could not breathe correctly. She was 8 years old and already smart enough to see through me. "Bad things do not get near you anymore," I said quietly. My voice sounded different now. Harder. Final. Lily smiled sleepily again before tracing one finger across the dimple in my cheek. "We have the same face thing?" The world stopped. No gun, no enemy, no betrayal had ever hit me harder than that tiny finger against my skin. She noticed it too. Of course she did. Blood recognized itself. My eyes burned unexpectedly, while memories crashed violently through my head. Claire laughing in my kitchen years ago. Claire dancing barefoot to old records. Claire crying in my arms after nightmares she never fully explained. And now this little girl existed because once upon a time someone loved me before the world turned me into something colder. Mr. Damien, Lily whispered softly. "Yeah, can I ask you something?" "Anything." She looked nervous suddenly. "If I have surgery someday, will my mommy be alone?" My throat tightened so hard I could barely answer. "No." Promise. I leaned forward slowly and kissed the top of her head before I could stop myself. Warm blonde hair. Vanilla shampoo. "My daughter. I promise," I whispered. And for the first time in years, I realized fear was not about dying anymore. It was about losing someone who finally gave me a reason to want to live. The most dangerous promise a man can make is the one he finally means with his entire soul. Lily fell asleep, still holding my hand. Her breathing slowly steadied beneath the soft hum of hospital machines, while rain continued tapping quietly against the windows beside her bed. I sat there longer than I should have, watching every rise and fall of her tiny chest, like my existence somehow depended on it now. Maybe it did. I had spent years surrounded by loyalty bought through fear, respect built through power, conversations measured like business transactions. But this little girl trusted me after knowing me for only a few hours. No conditions, no fear, just trust. And that terrified me more than enemies ever had. I carefully slipped my hand free once I was sure she was sleeping. Her stuffed bear rested beneath her arm, while blonde curls spilled softly across the pillow. My daughter. Even inside my own head, the words still sounded unreal. I stepped quietly into the hallway and found Claire sitting alone beneath dim lights near the vending machines. She looked exhausted enough to collapse. One hand covered her mouth while the other held untouched coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. She looked up immediately when she saw me walking toward her. Fear crossed her face first, then guilt, then something softer she tried hiding too quickly. She fell asleep. I said quietly. Claire nodded once. She usually fights sleep when she is scared. I leaned against the wall across from her. How long has she been sick? Claire stared down at the coffee cup before answering. They discovered the heart condition when she was 5. Every sentence she spoke tonight felt like another knife twisting slowly under my ribs. Why did you never come to me? She gave a tired laugh that held no happiness inside it. And say what, hello, Damien. Surprise. You have a daughter, and people threaten to kill us because of your last name. I looked away briefly because I hated that she was not wrong. I could have protected you. Claire's eyes finally lifted toward mine again. You were the danger back then. Silence settled heavily between us. Not angry silence. Sad silence. The kind built from years that could never be returned. I hated you for a long time, she admitted softly. Not because you were cruel to me, because I knew if you ever found out about Lily, you would burn the world down trying to keep her safe. I stared at her quietly. And now Claire's eyes filled slowly with tears again. Now I am too tired to do this alone anymore. Something inside me broke permanently hearing that, before I could answer. One of my men approached quickly from the elevator hallway. His expression instantly sharpened every instinct inside me. Boss, he said carefully, keeping his voice low. We have a problem. Claire immediately stiffened in her chair. I turned toward him slowly. Talk. A black sedan has circled the hospital 3 times in the last 20 minutes. 2 men inside. They are asking questions about a blonde woman and a little girl. Every muscle in Claire's body visibly froze. Fear flooded her face so fast it looked almost painful. I felt something colder settle into my chest. Not panic. Not rage. Worse. Purpose. I looked back toward Lily's hospital room down the hallway. Then I turned to my men. Lock this floor down, I said quietly. Nobody gets near my family. Some men spend their whole lives building empires only to realize one small voice can destroy every reason they ever needed power. The room stayed silent after Lily whispered that single word. Dad. Soft, sleepy, innocent, like she had no idea what it just did to me. I sat frozen beside her hospital bed, while her tiny fingers still rested loosely around mine. Claire covered her mouth as tears slid down her face. But I could not look at her yet. I could barely breathe. Nobody had ever needed me like this before. Men obeyed me, feared me, respected me because power demanded it. But this little girl trusted me simply because her heart decided to, and somehow that felt heavier than every responsibility I had carried my entire life. Lily drifted deeper into sleep beneath the pale hospital lights, her breathing finally calm for the first time all night. The storm outside had softened into quiet rain, tapping gently against the windows. Chicago looked distant from up here, smaller somehow, less important. Claire slowly brushed blonde curls away from Lily's forehead before whispering carefully. She has never called anyone that before. My throat tightened painfully. I looked down at my daughter again. My daughter. Even now, the truth still felt impossible. 8 years old. 8 years of life I could never get back. I should hate you for hiding her from me, I admitted quietly. Claire nodded through tears. I know, but I cannot. Her eyes lifted toward mine slowly, surprised by the honesty in my voice. I stared ahead at the dark hospital window instead of at her, because now I understand what fear made you do. Claire looked down immediately, crying harder now, but silently. Exhaustion lived in every part of her. Years of carrying secrets alone. Years of protecting Lily from shadows connected to my name. I hated myself for not seeing it sooner, for not finding them sooner. One of my men knocked softly before stepping halfway into the room. "Boss, the floor is secure. Hospital security is cooperating now." I nodded once without taking my eyes off Lily. "Double the detail tomorrow. Nobody follows them home." Claire immediately shook her head. "Damien, we cannot live surrounded by guards. You almost died trying to survive without them." My voice stayed calm. "But final? That part is over now." She stared at me quietly, because deep down she already knew I would never walk away from Lily after tonight. There was no version of this world where I would leave my daughter unprotected now that I knew she existed. Lily shifted slightly in her sleep and tightened her grip around my finger again. Tiny, warm, trusting. I leaned closer instinctively. "I am right here, baby." Claire watched me say those words with an expression I could not fully read. Sadness, relief, love buried beneath too many broken years. Then she whispered softly, "You already sound like her father." I looked at Lily for a long moment before finally answering, "No." My voice almost broke on the word. I sound like a man trying to deserve her. And somewhere between the rain, the hospital lights, and the tiny hand holding mine, I realized redemption does not arrive through power. Sometimes it arrives through a little girl who looks at a broken man and decides he is still worth loving anyway.